Over the past decade, the NBA has flourished in popularity. One recent NBA playoff game had broken the cable records for any program in the past 7 years. Professional basketball players in America make millions of dollars each season, controlling the game on and off the court. The National Basketball Players Association, or the NBPA, which serves to protect and support the rights and talents of current NBA players, remains strong. But there is still a lingering taste of racism that plagues the NBA. And that isn't more evident than during the height of the coronavirus pandemic, when the NBA spent time at the ESPN Wide World of Sports in Orlando, Florida, to bring upon a whole new game. Except there was no whole new game. It was business as usual.
Falls down, throws it ahead, Schroeder. Schroeder to Smart, three-pointer. Bang! Bang! He ties the game at the buzzer.
In March of 2020, the United States went under a national lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic coming to America. Millions of people became infected with the virus, and people were urged to quarantine in their homes and use personal protective equipment when they had to leave home. In a time where the common man was not allowed to gather with more than 10 people, the NBA developed a process where players from multiple teams could share the same arena, where the virus could spread through the game of basketball, an extremely high-contact sport. People and players have praised the bubble's creation as a marvel of medical and social science, praising medical workers for helping the association to find an alternative to play the game of basketball. Other people and players were skeptical of the bubble. Reporters such as Ben Golliver, the author of Bubble Ball, What I Learned Inside the NBA Bubble, did not think the NBA could come back, especially not to play a typical playoff series. LeBron James was quoted by the Lakers press in March of 2020 saying he originally wouldn't play in an empty gym if that was the only option to play. He would end up going to the bubble. Players such as former Los Angeles Lakers guard Avery Bradley and current Brooklyn Nets guard Kyrie Irving skipped on the bubble for family safety or injury rehabilitation. When I first heard the NBA was coming back, I wasn't super excited to see my favorite professional sports league come back. Even though I could have used more sports content from ESPN, that wasn't about the documentary about Michael Jordan airing during the height of the pandemic called The Last Dance. I thought the rumors of owners criticizing global health and wellness of its people was harsh, and typical of the way an American capitalist thinks when large fortunes are at stake. The Players Association had to make several agreements with their owners before the return, and even though there were some promising moments throughout the process, such as players wearing words of social movement on the back of their jerseys, and polling stations opening up at NBA team arenas across the nation promoting the upcoming election, the NBA bubble was a futile attempt at stopping racism and true social change. In a summer where America was faced with police brutality in epic proportions, the NBA was forced to continue on gatekeeping the structure between the owners and the performers. Ben Golliver, a Washington Post reporter who specializes in covering the NBA, was selected to report inside the NBA bubble. His perspective was one of skepticism, but he also acknowledges how the NBA needed the bubble to succeed in order to generate profit dollars to keep the league afloat. By the time it reached September, the bubble was an afterthought. Everybody complied with mask wearing and social distancing, but the players, owners, and staff took pride in having daily COVID tests, alcohol and drug allowance, and N95 masks during a time where most Americans waited over 2 weeks to receive one COVID test. Another reporter, Sam Anderson for the New York Times, went a different route than did Golliver. While Golliver focused on the people and events that surrounded him in order to find meaning, Anderson reports from a more analytical standpoint, looking at every faction of the bubble and why the event was significant. He noted the duality of the bubble experience for players. Yes, they were allowed to share whatever social message they chose, but those messages and their voices would be blurred out by rock music and State Farm commercials, fostering the idea that in the richest organizations, profit will always prove more important than national health. Golliver and Anderson's recounts suggest that among stardoms like the NBA, the concerns of a worldwide pandemic are masked itself, also that professional basketball could be played. Even though NBA players, staff, and official were testing negative throughout the bubble experience, their isolation and containment was for the sake of saving the organization, adding more money to the majority white owners' pockets at the expense of the mostly POC players sacrificing their lives. On August 26, 2020, when a black man in Kenosha, Wisconsin, Jacob Blake, was shot 7 times in the back by a police officer in front of his children, The Milwaukee Bucks, who were scheduled to play that night, refused to take the court, and the other teams reported to play that night followed suit. In less than 24 hours, the players' union and the owners came up with an agreement to return to basketball. The whole new game motto was a cheap way for the audience to believe there was real social change happening, even though it was simply the product of corporate activism, which is the equivalent of corporations only celebrating black people in February or the LGBTQ plus community in June. The bubble was always the league's platform, not the players. In conclusion, capitalism isn't activism. The league may have pledged $300 million over the next 10 years to bring upon economic growth in black communities, but how much more really is going to YouTube, ESPN, Burger King, and the companies that will outlive us when our lives surpass? The bubble acted as an excuse for professional basketball players to make money for their owners, increasing access to voting and promoting civil engagement, which corporate media promotes these messages without the looming presence of a global pandemic already. The rush towards player and owner agreements were needed by unison, which means something that consumers will be comfortable with, something where consumers could buy from those who control them. Jaylen Brown of the Boston Celtics will always be skeptical of NBA owners keeping their bargain of agreement deals. He says, everyone keeps saying, change is going to take this, change is going to take that. That's the incrementalism idea that keeps stringing you along to make you feel like something is going to happen, something's going to happen. People were dying in 2014, and it's 2020, and people are still dying the same way. They keep saying, reform, 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 and ain't nothing being reformed. The hope now is that more people in America will recognize racial, social, and economic disparities that continue to separate America today. The bubble was a soft gesture of attacking racism with no truly satisfying ending.